We're slowly letting people in. Welcome, everyone. While we will wait 1 more minute maybe to allow everyone to join us. In the meantime, if you want to let us know in the chat where you're from, we're very curious to know where is our audience listening in from. And while we'll wait, also a couple of housekeeping questions. Please keep your microphone off, as of course we are a lot of participants. So if there is background noise, it will become difficult to listen to the speakers. Oh, nice! I see a lot of comments in the chat coming up. Another note is that this session will be recorded and then it will be later available on the YouTube channels of the BIAS project, DIVERSIFAIR and Crowdhelix. So also if you would like to not be in the recording, please keep your camera off and be aware that this session will be recorded. And if you have any questions at any time for the speakers, please type them in the chat and we will make sure to either address them in the session or answer to you in the chat in writing. Wow, a lot of different places. So it's 3 minutes past. I think we can start since we have a very packed agenda. Again, welcome to everyone. We welcome you today at our event on intersectional fairness in AI, legal frameworks, tools, and learning opportunities. My name is Silve Ecclesia, and I am a PhD student in Science and Technology Studies at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And I will be your moderator for today, so guide you through this very interesting event. So today's topic, as I said, is about intersectional fairness in artificial intelligence. And this event has been organized by Crowdhelix as part of a collaboration between the BIAS project and DIVERSIFAIR project, who both do very interesting work in the area of artificial intelligence and especially intersectionality, diversity, and inclusion in AI. And today also just happens to be the International Human Rights Day on the 10th of December. So I think that there is no better way to celebrate than to explore together how we can actually make AI better and more fair, and so more in line with the human rights as well. Okay, so without further delay, I would like now to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker today for the webinar is Rogel Søda. Rogel Søda is a professor in Science and Technology Studies at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. His research is on the digitalization of society and exploring the dynamic relationship between humans and technology. And he has published books such as AI for Diversity and Digitalization, A Guide to Critical Thinking. He is currently leading the research projects SOMAT and the BIAS project, of which he will tell us more in a second. So Rogel, the floor is yours, and perfect, we can see your slides.
Great, thank you very much, Sylvia, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this webinar. So I'm Roger Søda. I'm a professor in Science and Technology Studies, and I'm also the project leader of the BIAS project, where we are looking at how we can mitigate biases of AI in the labor market. So when you think about the normal workplace, you might have some assumptions of who is working there and who should be working there. And this is something we are investigating in this large EU project. So the big question we are investigating is, when someone applies for a job, how can you make sure that the right person got the job and also ensure a fair hiring process? This is something we are investigating in the BIAS project. You can also visit our project website, biasproject.eu. So this is a research project funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe research program. It's under Pillar 2, Cluster 4, and has a project size of around 4.2 million euros. And it is led by us at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology at the Humanities faculty in close collaboration with our computer science department. And as mentioned, I'm leading the project. And it is a 4-year project that has now been active for around 2 years. So we are halfway through our project and have some exciting results to share with you. The project has consortium members from 9 different countries from all corners of Europe, from NTNU in Norway to Iceland, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Estonia, and Turkey. And we have several different partners from research universities and also organizations who are working on how we can make work life less biased and more inclusive. So the project mission we have in BIAS is to empower the AI and human research management community by addressing and mitigating algorithmic biases. And if we look back in history, we can see that the history of human work has a lot of discrimination when hiring. This can be based on age discrimination, gender discrimination, race or class discrimination, for example. So the history of work show that there are a lot of biases or preferences on who to hire, which can be exclusive to groups of people. So just to show you some examples of human discrimination at work, some recent examples. Our report has shown that women in tech has a 73 experience of gender bias in the workplace. In Norway, where I am based, studies have for several years found that people applying to jobs with not traditional Norwegian sounding names have a 25% lower chance to be called in for job interviews, leading to many people changing their names in order to be called in for interviews in the first place. In Turkey, people have been fired for being pregnant at work. In the US, there are allegedly discrimination against refugees. And in Belgium, we are seeing age discrimination. And in Italy, there has been reported discrimination of nationality against non-Italians, especially for immigrant women applying for jobs. And these are just some examples of several discriminatory actions that has happened and is still active in the world of biased hiring today. Now, the big question that we are wondering about is what is happening when artificial intelligence is learning from previous human bias and being used for recruitment. We are seeing a lot of AI being used in recruitment and managing of workers, both in finding, screening, assessing candidates. These are some examples of companies that are being used to screen and search with data from LinkedIn, for example, or other websites to show best matches. Other examples of AI-driven video interviews also exist, where people are being filmed while at their interview to try to discern some personal characteristics out of how people act in their interviews. And also examples of companies placing candidates faster can be found using various degrees of AI to find the right candidate for the job. Now, in our project, we are wondering how can we make sure that AI does not reproduce human bias and discrimination or invent new forms of discrimination for job applicants and workers. So through our project, we have 3 project goals we are working on. One is awareness raising, making people more aware of the importance of tackling gender and intersectional biases in AI. This can be both for the AI and the human research management communities. We're also building capacity in understanding biases and exclusion mechanisms in these communities, also with tools to prevent bias in AI. And we are developing a debiaser tool for that can be used to reduce biases in HR practices. Through the project, we have quite a lot of different interdisciplinary research and impact methodologies in order to achieve these goals. One is a survey of workers and perceptions of bias, which we completed already in the project with around 5,000 respondents. We also have ethnographic fieldwork with employers, employees, and AI developers from different European countries, learning more in-depth how we can understand selection biases when someone is both applying for a job and being assessed for a job and then hired for a job. We're also creating national labs in each country with communities of practitioners, employees, human research management, and AI specialists. And these national labs are also open to be joined, so we encourage everyone to join them. You can find links on our BIAS project website for that. We are also doing AI research and development with a focus on natural language processing, NLP, and case-based reasoning, CBR. And we are creating the BIASer, which is our proof of concept technology with modules that both identify and mitigate bias and unfairness in decision making, which will be available to the AI community. So to explain a little bit more about the BIASer tool that we are making, I want to take us back to the problem issue of what happens when someone applies for a job. So we know that motivation letters and CVs, even if they are anonymized to avoid bias, this is often not enough when AI is assessing your CV and motivation letters. You can, for example, remove your age or your gender, but there are patterns in the CV that can be picked up by AI and lead to bias in decision making. This can, for example, be your hobbies, your family situation, which can tell a lot about who you are as a person without explicitly saying, for example, your gender or your age, for example. And this is a quite delicate matter for automated recruitment tools, which is quite good at guessing who we are as humans based on inferring data. Then we also have the problem of language stereotypes. So a study recently showed that the sentence man is to woman as computer programming is to blank showed computer programmer is to homemaker, or father is to mother as doctor is to nurse, showing a quite gendered understanding of language and also which professions we associate with different genders. And this can be quite problematic, as I will show in this example here on the left, where we have two first names, Anna and John. And while John is more associated with the word executive, Anna is more associated with the word wedding, showing a quite gendered understanding of how we couple words together. And this can, of course, be quite unfortunate if, for example, both Anna and John apply for an executive leadership role, where the algorithms might think that John is more suited just because he has a male name. So ideally, we want both these people, if they have the same qualifications, to be equally assessed for a job as an executive director, for example, which is why we are using our pre-trained language model to de-bias and mitigate bias to uncouple this. And I also wanted to say a little bit about how AI used in the labor market also needs to be trustworthy and socially responsible. So we are both working on this from the technical side, but also from the social science and humanities side. And one thing we are working with quite actively is the assessment list for trustworthy artificial intelligence, or the ALTI framework for self-assessment that became active in 2020. We're a high-level expert group on AI from the European Commission, have worked on ethics guidelines on trustworthy AI, and created these list of requirements. And if we look at requirement number 5 on diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, this is directly what we are dealing with in our project to make hiring more diverse, non-discriminatory, and also fairer. And of course, we have new regulatory frameworks, such as the European AI Act that has entered into force from this year, and which we are now seeing being implemented throughout the EU, but also impacting associated countries such as Norway. In the BIAS project, we are very concerned about bringing everyone to the table. And one of the ALTI principles, as you can see here on the left, is in order to develop trustworthy AI, it is advisable to consult stakeholders who may directly or indirectly be affected by AI systems to ensure worker information, consultation, and participation throughout the whole process of implementing AI systems at organizations. And we think it is quite important that we get HR specialists, AI developers, workers who know some about AI and some who don't know that much about AI around the table to together discuss how do they see a fair hiring process and how can we understand that from multiple stakeholders. But of course, we do get into some barriers along the way. One of these barriers is the word fairness itself, because it is quite complex to start unpacking. So the challenge of bias in automated recruiting starts already with defining what is fair. So there are different disciplinary understandings of fairness, different socio-cultural understandings. What is fair for an individual, for a company, for a minority group, or for society can differ and not be the same definition. In our project, we look primarily at procedural fairness, which means that similar candidates are treated in a similar way when applying for a job. And what similar here means is also dependent on individual businesses and use cases, which is why we need good qualitative along with quantitative knowledge on how hiring processes are working. Then to summarize, hiring is often discriminatory when done by humans because hiring is to have a preference with someone over another person. But we need to ensure that AI does not also discriminate as humans have been shown to do. AI has great potential, but can also lead to exclusion for different groups, especially marginalized groups. And how AI is designed and how data is selected and trained are not neutral factors, but can lead to biased outcomes. So I did include this picture you can see on the right, which is an AI-generated picture that is showing the ideal workplace. But as you can see, there are, for example, no older people in this picture, and it's quite stereotyped with everyone looking about the same, and that's not really how workplaces look. So I would like to thank everyone for listening for this first talk of today. And also you might consider visiting our biasproject.eu website, where we also have a CV donating campaign where we are still receiving more CVs. So we are very interested to learn from your experiences as well. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing and answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Torger. We do have a couple of questions in the chat that maybe we can address quickly before moving on. And especially we had a question from Claudia, who's joining us from Berlin, asking if the research group investigates biases against neurodivergent people. And Kelly, following up on that, highlighting how this is especially important because algorithms are based on design and information. So how can we make algorithms fair for people that have communication barriers? Would you like? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this excellent question. So we are primarily focusing on 5 discrimination factors, which are age, gender, race, class, and sexual orientation. But we have also seen that neurodivergency is a very important factor that we want to look more into. So we are trying to also implement this more in our activities in these last 2 years of the project. But it is a quite difficult parameter to be working on. So I'm very happy to also follow up with you who have questions and maybe suggestions on how we can also do this better. Thank you.
Thank you, Torger. And I see that there are other questions coming up in the chat regarding the technicalities of the debiasing tool. I also suggest maybe you visit the BIAS website where there's more information and tools that maybe you can check, as it is a lot to cover in just one presentation. And I think that now we will move on to the second presentation. I also see a lot of people are leaving their LinkedIn contact in the chat and say where they're from. And I think that's super nice, of course, to already create this kind of community around this event. So please continue to do so because it's very nice to see. And yeah, thank you again, Roger. And as I said, now we can move to our next presenter, who is Lisette Malias. Lisette is a chemist by training, and she's a seasoned project manager with over 15 years of experience leading multidisciplinary scientific R&D projects across both commercial and nonprofit sectors. And especially she excels in fostering trust and leveraging team diversity to maximize impact. And at TNO today, Lisette leads the DIVERSIFAIR consortium, striving to reduce social injustice and enhance public trust in AI, of which she will tell us more now. So Lisette, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sylvia, for this nice introduction. And welcome everybody to the presentation that I'm going to give you about DIVERSIFAIR, which is an EU consortium and where we aim to contribute to building a fairer future for AI in Europe. I'm assuming everyone can see the slides, right? Okay, good.
Yes.
So, who's DIVERSIFAIR? Well, that's a European consortium with 8 partners from academia, from small companies, from research institutes, and together we form the DIVERSIFAIR team. And what I would like to say here as well is that I'm not the only one from the DIVERSIFAIR team that is present here, because later during the roundtable discussion on shaping the future, Susan and Elena will be there to discuss with you about that. And later on also Gemma will present something on AI auditing and bias detection. Well, DIVERSIFAIR has received funding from the EU, and next to that the partners also contribute with their own budgets. And in total, that adds up to about 1.9 million. We have a 3-year project that started 1.5 years ago. So as the BIAS project, we're halfway. And yeah, we're very grateful for the funding we received from the European Education and Culture Executive Agency. And with that, I would like to dive into the project. So our goal is to improve fairness in AI. And well, as you know, bias is a critical issue in AI, and that can impact individuals, businesses, and also society with potentially severe consequences. So there's, for example, a data robot survey that says that about a third or more than a third of companies reported experiencing financial losses due to AI bias. So that includes lost revenue, it includes lost customer attrition, and it also includes even legal disputes. And then next to that, the bias that is, let's say, discrimination on one aspect. Within this project, we dive more into intersectional bias. So that's where multiple forms of discrimination overlap. And that's an even larger challenge for AI, because that can perpetuate social injustices, and it can also harm vulnerable communities. So, for example, here in the Netherlands, we had the Dutch childcare benefits scandal, where the tax authorities, well, incorrectly thought that people who received funding from the childcare funding were incorrectly leased for fraud, and they requested parents to pay back huge amounts of money, and that led to debt, psychological damage, and sometimes even out-of-home placing of children. Actually, that happened in 2021. Well, they're still repairing the damage, or trying to. So, having said that, what we're doing to improve fairness in AI is that we try to integrate technical and non-technical expertise to identify and mitigate algorithmic bias in AI. We also integrate an intersectional approach to fairness and equality in AI development. And we also aim to contribute to develop a new generation of AI practitioners and auditors that are both technically proficient, but also are equipped to challenge biases and can also advocate for intersectional fairness. So then our tangible output. So on one hand, that's largely focused on training. So we're developing a specialized course on preventing and mitigating intersectional bias for AI practitioners. So that's really for tech people. And then next to that, we also have for other people, sector-specific educational kits for the non-tech stakeholders. And these actually, the first versions of these have been created and they're about to be published soon. And apart from the trainings, We also aim to develop a fair AI Scrum methodology, because Scrum is often used in software development. And then we want to build in that by default, fairness and intersectionality is incorporated there in the process. So you proactively look into these aspects while developing the software. And last but not least, we also aim for the development of tools to detect and mitigate intersectional bias. And what we target are primarily the recruitment sector and the educational sector, because that is what is embedded in the core activities of the project. However, the knowledge that we build up and the tools that we develop and the trainings are also applicable for example, health and well-being, social media sector, public services, and banking. And for example, throughout the algorithmic audits that Ethicas is executing, we also tap into these target group sectors. And the specific target groups that we have are students, so higher educational and vocational educational students, civil society and enforcement agencies. So that means that we want to, for example, include equality bodies and data protection agencies that are mandated with enforcing equality and also data protection law across Europe. And also we target private duty bearers. So that could be, for example, employers who use AI applications for recruitment, like Roger was saying in the BIAS project. And then the impact that we aim for is that we want to increase the number of AI professionals that have the right skills to develop and use fair AI systems and tools with fundamental European values embedded, and also high quality standards in AI for ethical audits. And once we have that, then it follows that we want to impact also that we improve the public trust in AI, and that power inequalities can be addressed, and that also social injustice that comes from one-dimensional thinking maybe that can decrease. And also it will lead to improved resilience for public and private sectors. We also want to make sure that there's increased access for women to the AI sector. And that, by the way, goes for vulnerability groups as well. So, for example, in the trainings we provide or we develop, there is a possibility that especially women or vulnerable groups can have improved access to the trainings. And also, what we want to achieve is that there are less financial losses due to AI bias. And with that, I would like to conclude this high-level overview of the DIVERSIFAIR project. And please feel free to get in touch. You can scan the QR code for that. And of course, you can also leave a message in the chat. And I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I feel like this gives me even more hope, because between the BIAS project and DIVERSIFAIR, I hope you're covering all of the process of AI development and implementation and managing to make it more inclusive and intersectional. So thank you for the very interesting presentation about the project. I see that there is some support in the chat. And also one question now I see coming up from Monique.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I know.
I was
about
trying to
elaborating on civil society.
Elaborate. Okay, perfect.
Let me see. What did I say about civil society? Yeah, that is that's a good question, because there we have, of course, during the course of setting up the project and developing the project, we've been thinking about equality bodies and data protection agencies. And while we're now in the process of starting to get tangible output, that is now something that we really need to nail down, how we specifically target these groups and what we do include. So that's at the moment difficult to really specify. And I'm not sure if anyone else in the team would like to elaborate on that.
Maybe I can help with the concrete example on how we do it.
Thank you, Steven.
Hi, I'm Steven. I'm also in the team of the DIVERSIFAIR project. And in one of the work packages, we're working on concrete and actionable recommendations for data scientists to incorporate intersectionality in their collaborations to develop or to implement. And there we first gathered all these insights from the focus groups, Women for Cyber and Women in AI, like what is important? What do you find important that they include in their development? And we talked to the data scientists, like why do you find it difficult to implement intersectionality and critical thinking into your work? Then we got all the recommendations ready now, and then we evaluated it with the data scientists. Do you now understand these recommendations? Do you find them actionable? And then as the final step, we'll go again to civil society to ask, do you find these the most important recommendations and the first steps forward to start to change right now? So I think that's the two key ways that we have incorporated civil society at the moment. Happy to hear other ideas from the community.
I see Monique is asking which civil society. So maybe that's also something. Can you elaborate on that, Steven?
I think at the moment we spoke to It's a Freedom from the Netherlands, the digital human rights organization. I think Louise and Camille can give more insight on who we spoke to.
Hi, yes, this is Louise. Monique, actually, you were part of, I think you were part of one of the focus group, right? We spoke with, Basic Freedom, Amnesty, Liberties Europe. Well, I have I think I have a full list. I'll answer there directly in the chat if that's easier, I think.
I think that's great. And thank you so much, Lisette, for the presentation. And thank you also to Stephen and Louise for jumping in and telling us more about the project. I think now we can move to the more, in a way, meaty part of this event, which is our roundtable discussion. Our next session, so it's this roundtable discussion on the topic of shaping the future, the impact of the AI Act on the workplace. As many of you probably already know, the European Union recently provided this new approved the AI Act, which will provide this new regulatory framework for artificial intelligence. And this, of course, will also affect AI in the context of work and in the workplace, and especially issues of intersectionality and inclusion. So now we will have a discussion with three wonderful speakers that I think are going to be highlighted soon. Also, keep in mind that as before, you can leave questions in the chat and we will try to address the questions at the end, towards the end of the session. So with us today, we have Susan Levy, who is Assistant Professor at the School of Information and Communication at University College Dublin, Carlotta De Gotti, who is a postdoctoral researcher in law, gender and technology at the ILO Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden University, and Elena Georgieva, a senior specialist scientist in AI governance and regulation at TNO, as well as external PhD researcher at Leiden University. So welcome to our panelists, first of all. It's very good to have you here, and I'm sure we will have a wonderful discussion. So as a first question, I just wanted to ask you to tell us briefly about you and how does your work relate to AI fairness and intersectionality. And Susan is the first one on my screen, so maybe Susan, you can start.
Hey, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Susan Levy, assistant professor in UCD, and my work on, most recently, it's on techniques to identify and mitigate bias and discrimination in large language models, but also done a project on multimodal models, so image generators, like DALL-E and the likes, so how to identify it and then techniques to mitigate it, and also work, on the policy side, and then and here on the DIVERSIFAIR project as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Elena, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sylvia. And hi, everyone. It's lovely that you can join us for the webinar and that you're interested in the topic. I think we're all very passionate about it. So I work mostly on issues related to the governance and regulation of artificial intelligence. And AI fairness manifests in a twofold way, usually. So in our type of work that we do at TNO, at least in my department and the projects I'm involved in, AI fairness on the one hand is this meta, very abstract goal, right? So it's kind of the status quo, the high aspirational state. Fairness basically safeguards fundamental principles such as non-discrimination and equality, right, which caters to the foundations of the rule of law. So this is how, like AI fairness usually relates to my work. On the other hand, however, I already mentioned there's like two manifestations of AI fairness. AI fairness also very often comes in the shape of an AI fairness toolkit, right? We have fairness metrics, evaluations, bias detection and mitigation. So basically a way to shape the impact of the technology on the ground. And so in my line of work, usually we try to establish a communication between these two types of fairness. I think also Roger in his presentation already alluded to the different types of fairness that are out there, right? So in my line of work, we try to establish a communication between those two types of fairness, basically the high-level goal and the means towards that end, the AI toolkit, the AI fairness toolkit. And for that, intersectionality plays a very big role for us in the sense of both as a theoretical framework, but also as an action framework, and trying to sort of allow us to ask a different type of questions, right? I mean, fairness for whom? What are we missing? Which are the layers that we could grasp, etc., etc.
Perfect. Very interesting. Thank you, Lina. And Carlotta?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. As Sylvia said, I work on this Pandora box, which is law, gender, and technology. So in this framework, fairness is a fundamental principle that I am exploring, both in terms of AI design, but primarily in terms of AI regulation, in view of gender and intersectional equality achievement, because we should be optimistic and positive, but also as a researcher involved in the BIAS project, let's say that we have tried to understand what means fairness for diverse stakeholders that are impacted by AI systems in the labor market. And Roger somehow touched upon this, but let's say that the consortium shared a survey targeting job applicants and workers. We interview AI developers and HR practitioners working or perhaps considering to work with this type of tool. And we held also other activities where we also managed to interact with trade union representatives, civil-based society organizations representatives, and so forth. So let's say that, yeah, as a legal scholar, I work on fairness in my office, but as a BIAS project researcher, I also do more interactive and qualitative research.
Thank you, Carlotta. And I have to address your office work now, actually more than the one in the field. But since we are talking about the AI Act, I wanted to go back to you, Carlotta, and ask you what is the AI Act actually, and how will it regulate the use of AI in the workplace? So what are we talking about, basically?
This is another question that opens up potential Pandora box, but I'll try to be really, really concise. And if you have any question, I see that the chat is on fire, but also just feel free to drop me a message, write me on LinkedIn. So just in brief, the AI Act was adopted by the European Union last June, and it will enter into force in less than 2 years now. It was welcomed worldwide because it aims to lay down minimal rule on the design of AI systems. And to do so, the European Union decided to divide AI system into categories depending on the level of risk they pose. And AI systems in the workplace are actually included in the list explicitly. They are considered AI systems that might pose high risk to fundamental rights and other interests at stake. But actually, what we should pay attention is that, yeah, it's true, we have AI systems that are designed and labeled as for the labor market. But actually, there are AI systems that we use in our everyday, like, for instance, ChatGPT, that might be used in the labor market, that might have some positive or negative implications, but might not fall within this label of AI system for the workplace. So let's say this is like in general. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is that what the European Union did after dividing AI system into risk categories is that, of course, the higher the level of risk the AI system poses, the more obligations AI developers and deployers will have to comply with. And this is really like a brief overview, like for those of you who have had the chance to open it, it's more than 4,400 pages. So yeah, I think we can leave the floor to a more perhaps intellectually stimulating discussion, but this is in brief what the AI Act is.
Yes, thank you, Carlotta. And going a little bit more in depth, then maybe now Carlotta mentioned these risk categories. So I wanted to ask to Elina, what are also the limitations of this risk-based approach in your experience?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that, and thanks to Carlotta for a great overview. Obviously, I think there is a lot of scholarship out there already, right? And it keeps coming at us on, like the structure of the act, how the regulation has been structured, like as having a risk-based approach that basically at its foundation, what the regulatory interventions then mean and what shape they take, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, indeed, I wanted to take this opportunity and reflect with my fellow panelists, but also with the audience on actually the regulatory objective of the AI Act, right? So we have this risk-based regulation, and as such, it also comes with a particular toolbox, right, with particular regulatory interventions. Because it's a risk-based regulation, it has, among other things, also risk managerial methodologies, right? However, the Act's regulatory objective, as most of you know, is the protection of health, safety, fundamental rights and values, right? So very broad, very, very big societal interests and stakes. And the issue with that is, however, like it's very commendable, it's a wonderful objective, we all strive for that, right? Is that fundamental rights and values by default are very broad generic categories, right? I mean, they're designed this way, that's their nature, because fundamental rights are supposed to accommodate a number of different standings or normative interests, right? Also the sort of the contestation of different individual positions. And, like imagine the fundamental right as this broad umbrella, right? And usually if we want to specify a fundamental right or, ascertain its limitations, its scope, or, how actually an alleged violation, an alleged prejudice to a fundamental right looks like, that's where the courts come in, right? That's the judiciary's role. And it's also a question of democratic legitimacy. And it's usually done in the aftermath, right, of, like an alleged prejudice, an alleged harm, or of an alleged violation to a fundamental right. So it's really an ex post kind of reality. The Act's rationale, however, like in this methodological toolbox, is ex ante, right? So the risk specification is supposed to happen beforehand. We're supposed to be aware of the risks beforehand in order to be able to apply the particular risk management, risk containment, assessment, right, etc., mitigation, if we cannot prevent the risk entirely. And this is where it gets tricky, because we have these two different rationales that are kind of competing and we need to reconcile them. But I think this is going to be a challenge for the, like current reality, but also for the near to even more distant future, because risk, as the Act defines it, is obviously composed of knowledge about outcomes and probability, right? And the outcome in that regard would be the impact on the fundamental right, would be the harm on the fundamental right. And the difficulty here would be, or the challenge in a situation would be to make a more general claim of what a fundamental right violation or a harm looks like, right? Because it's so contextual, because actually that knowledge is usually available ex post and not ex ante, right? In the stage of sort of trying to specify what a risk looks like. And I hope that makes sense. I know that this is like two different types of logics and realities that we're trying to reconcile here, but basically it comes down to this: to tackle risks and to deploy and employ these kind of risk managerial methodologies, etc., we need more knowledge on the AI harms, right? On how AI harm manifests on the ground, who is being harmed. Going back also to the question that Carlotta alluded to, and also Roger, like fairness for whom, right? So whom is this actually catering to? Whose interests are being protected? So those are two very different logics, like of the risk managerial tool underneath or like underlying the AI Act and the actual protection of fundamental rights. And I'll leave it at here. I'm happy to elaborate later, but I'm mindful of the clock, so I would just pin a point here.
Yes, thank you so much, Helena. I know this is, as you said, a very packed topic and very interesting. Before diving deeper into the fairness part, I wanted to hear also from Susan, what do you think will be the AI Act impact on the development of AI systems and the natural language process that you work on?
I think it will have a huge impact, for sure. And it's only the beginning. But in a way, if you look at the range of systems that the AI Act will really impact, it's not that broad. It's if you're in the high risk areas, if you're making decisions about people's lives that will fundamentally affect their rights as citizens. So what's that? That's your access to credit, your access to a job, your access to education. So we've decided that that's high risk, and we need oversight and transparency and all of these things if we're going to get computers to make those decisions about people's lives. There's not that many systems out there that do that, but and you would hope that the ones that are in place kind of are already at this point, having basic checks in place for bias and discrimination. So I would expect those high-risk areas to formalize the processes that hopefully are already taking place. There's going to be a lot more techniques to analyze the outcomes, data sets, all of that process. So there'll be more tools and techniques developed. There already are quite a few, but and there'll be new kinds of governance structures within companies. Maybe an AI oversight board that's cross-disciplinary that just checks both compliance, but also are they ahead of legislation? Are they ethical? Because if you're ethical, the AI Act is not, it's something everybody should be doing already. So I'd expect those changes. So a much more formalized process, and a whole new industry in auditing AI, a whole new profession, really. So those are the kinds of things I'd expect.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, exactly as you said, it will put a whole new light and attention on the whole AI process, from the development to the implementation to the consequences, of course.
One other thing actually I meant to add is I think increasingly the main company organizations will buy in software that has AI embedded in it. And I think that was probably not the case, when the AI Act was started to be written. There was a plan, an idea of building a machine learning application. But you buy it in, so there'll be a lot more attention on that procurement and that obligations for transparency if you're building something, because the difference between if you're a provider and a deployer, you have different obligations. So you don't want to be a deployer of an AI system and change it and accidentally become a deployer and not know that you have all these obligations. So that will have to be really, really clarified, that procurement process,
Yeah, thank you. Very good point, because we are seeing, at least I'm part of the BIAS project, of course, and there we are seeing as well that sometimes there is a more blurred line between who's the provider, who's the deployer of the AI system. But I wanted to give you some time now to kind of discuss together, not just ask specific questions, and especially to hear from you, where do you think what role does intersectionality play as well in the AI Act? If you think that there is intersectionality in the AI Act, if it is addressed, if it is not, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
General question. May I jump in?
Go ahead.
I see also Carlotta is eager to contribute. Well, I think it's intersectionality in the Act, regretfully, is not explicit in any way, right? However, there are certain concepts in the body of the regulation that are related to intersectionality. So we have references to participation and non-discrimination, diversity, cultural diversity, right? Gender equality, etc., equal access, I think even. And those are like scattered mostly throughout the preamble, and to a certain extent, I think they're more explicit, for instance, in Article 95, which is the voluntary code of conduct or something like that, which basically says that if you have participation is important because if you have inclusive and diverse teams, this should actually lead to inclusive and diverse design of AI systems, which regretfully, I'm not entirely sure that this is how it works outright. I mean, the causality between those actions. So those concepts are there. However, what is missing and why, for instance, intersectionality is not there, because they're like signal posts, right? Those concepts signal certain inequalities, and the attempt to counter these type of inequalities in an isolated, non-orchestrated efforts, right? And so this is where, for instance, intersectionality could come in. And I think as researchers and practitioners here, we see the value of it because in the work that we're trying to do, we use it as a type of lens that allows us to see how those different concepts and how those different manifestations of inequalities interact with each other, right? So what is the relationship? What are the layers of those inequalities, et cetera, et cetera? And although the Act itself does not explicitly reference intersectionality in any way, but only related concepts, we can actually do better. I think we can do better on national level, in national policies, but also in national laws, for instance, in the laws that are to translate the AI regulation into the national legal landscape. There is still space, there is still some hope that we can use it both as a sort of theoretical orientation, but also as an actionable governance tool to make more inclusive policies and implement them on the ground on the national level. I'm curious what my co-panelists think about it as well.
I mean, I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, intersectionality is not there, nor did I expected to see it there.
Fair enough, yes. Yeah.
In that case, I was not so positive and optimistic. But as you also said, I think we can complain, we can criticize, we can highlight these absence, but most importantly, we have to, let's say, play with what we have, with the instruments that the AI Act gives us, and to interpret them and operationalize them in a way that is inclusive of intersectional experiences and considerations. So perhaps I'm jumping to what will be the conclusion of this panel, I don't know, but it's really like a matter of engaging with diverse stakeholders in terms of training, in terms of raising awareness, and so forth. I mean, we can make a list of the different articles of the AI Act where we can play with, but yeah, I think that's the main challenge, the future challenge, to integrate intersectionality in the AI Act.
Well, at least we have somewhere to start from.
Yeah, and not to use it as a label, but as something that is there.
Yeah, thank you. And Susan, would you like to add something as well? Or
yeah, sure. Thanks. It's for me, from my reading, like in a way, defining what fairness and bias and all is wide open. It's up to people, you know. So to me, it's implicit because something couldn't possibly be fair if it's fair from an intersectional viewpoint. So, really, how this is going to run in practice is if you can develop tools and methods that can be automated, or, you know, frameworks and approaches that can be built into auditing methodologies easily. So that translate the theory into actual tools that can be used at scale and reused. Then you define, so it's you define what fairness is. So I think there's a real opportunity, but it's a real challenge to be able to deploy, to go from theory to something that's like you can put a number on. I think it's a real challenge, and there's a lot of work I see on kind of de-biasing data sets, or, you know, and I don't think you can't de-bias language. You can't have objective language, or you can't have an objective image.
I love this point. Yeah.
Some of this is just the basics of bias, like the definition of bias can be mixed up with a statistical view of bias, like a sampling bias. But bias in the social, you know, in sense of gender, for example, it's discrimination against a group, and the outcome has to negatively affect them. It's not just difference. And yeah, so there's two. It's the definition of biases, and some of the research and tools out there might be a bit going in the wrong direction. And in one way, owning that if you speak, it's from a perspective, and, you know, that language, it has a standpoint embedded in it. I'm kind of go at this debiasing, or, you know, differently, that you can't have an objective system. It's like it, you know, if you've trained it on data. Anyway, I'm rambling. But in terms of the AI Act, I think it's a real opportunity to say, okay, here's what those terms in the AI Act actually mean. You know, so fairness means intersectional fairness. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. Of course, also we are seeing that in general bias, it can mean a lot of different things, and they can be both like negative or positive. It's very difficult. It's not something that you can take away from language, as you said. I wanted to just also remind the audience. Sorry, just now. Continuing the conversation, but to remind the audience that you can type your questions in the chat, and we will have now 5 minutes also to take questions from the audience. But before that, I wanted to spin it a little bit more positively to end our roundtable, and just ask you in 1 minute if you could tell us, in your experience and also experiences from the projects, of course, that you are a part of, what are our next steps to engage with the AI Act, and especially to ensure that it also takes intersectionality into account. Maybe Carlotta, would you like to start, as you already touched upon this?
Since I already broke the ice. Yeah, so like with the BIAS project, like we are continuing to engaging with diverse stakeholders. We will have like some specialized training targeting either AI developers or HR people or trade union organization, where there will be a module on the AI Act. And we are also trying to raise awareness. So like events like these, perhaps sometimes also with more time to delve into different details. So yeah, I would say this is what the BIAS project is doing right now.
Thank you, Carlotta. Elina?
Yeah, I think maybe I can add to that and draw on actually the work that my colleague Steven has been doing, something that he mentioned previously about the principles for data scientists, for instance, right? So I think there is, next to that, the DIVERSIFAIR project, there is still a lot of awareness raising to do. Still, And when it comes to, I think when it comes to the workplace, when it comes to, sorry, to the the workplace, right? That was the question. For some time, I thought like workforce. It's, I think it's really being mindful of the fact also, as Susan said, that we cannot be objective, right? There's always going to be a certain degree of subjectivity. This is also why we're here. This is also why we speak of intersectional fairness. So next to awareness raising and all those beautiful knowledge tools that we're developing, we also need to actually make sure that both the users and sort of the people who are the receiving end are empowered enough knowledge-wise. So we need to scale up, and when it comes to AI literacy, to knowledge, and make sure that the people who are actually both interacting but also receiving sort of the impact of the technology have the necessary skills, right? So this is something that I think it's going to become even more pressing, not only in relation to the workplace, but also beyond.
Yes, thank you, Lina. And Susan, would you like to end our roundtable?
That's a lot of pressure ending a roundtable, but I guess
we have a couple questions then.
Okay, there's so much to say on this in terms of the AI Act, but I'd encourage people to look outside the AI Act and what it doesn't cover or what's minimal risk. That's sudden that now, if we look at it, you might think actually that's high risk, and it might not be considered high or medium risk. Like generative AI is coming into every workplace fast, and although we have general purpose models regulated, like there's new transparency requirements, that'll take time to implement. But the reason they're there is because it can fundamentally alter our information ecosystem and our ability to trust, whether who wrote what, whether something we read is by a human or not. So I would urge really, looking ahead. There's things that there's a lag, and it's people on this call have that ability to critically analyze the impact and social impact of AI technologies that are used daily.
Yes, thank you, Susan. And it was a false end because we also have a couple of questions from the chat. We have a question from Monique. I'm just saying it here that I think actually can be taken in the chat maybe because it's quite, I think it can be answered referencing the AI Act directly and the risk categories. And then we have a question from Niha asking, how does the panel think that the AI Act in its present form balances fostering innovation and ensuring transparency and accountability? So the usual balance between supporting the development, but also making sure that it's regulated development. I don't know if somebody would like to take this question.
Good question, right? I think this is what any regulator struggles with. Let's say it's a decent attempt, right? This is also what the risk-based approach caters to, trying to establish that balance. But at least in my reading, the balance is not really there. The act does favor innovation over accountability, for instance, because the tools, the regulatory interventions that are there, like based on transparency, or like remnants of accountability, at this point they don't really empower the individual, they don't really empower the public. So to me, for instance, the way I read it, it's not really a balance, or if it is, it's like it weighs on the side of innovation.
Yes, thank you, Lina. I will give you 1 minute if you want to add something more, but otherwise we've run out of time. Is that okay? Perfect. Then I will just ask everyone in the audience to give a virtual round of applause, of course, for our panelists today. And thank you so much for discussing this topic with us. Of course, it's a very, very complex and packed discussion, so there's a lot more that could be said. But I think that we at least tackled some issues here and talked about some parts of the AI Act that are interesting for our projects in the context of the workplace and topics of bias and diversity. So thank you again. Really, it was a pleasure.
Goodbye.
Our next speaker is Gemma Galdon-Clavel from Ethicas AI. Sorry, Gemma. So our next topic will be AI auditing and bias detection. Now we have Dr. Gemma Galdon-Clavel, founder and CEO of Ethicas AI, who is a trailblazer in AI safety and auditing. And her Ithaca platform automates impact analysis to ensure AI is fair, safe, and trustworthy. Gemma is recognized globally. She's a Mozilla Rise 25 honoree, a Forbes Women Leader in Tech, and an Ashoka Fellow, a sought-after speaker and advisor to institutions like the UN and OECD. Her insights on AI appear in outlets like Wired and Forbes, and it's a pleasure to have you today. So, Gemma, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thanks for having me. Great to see some of our consortium partners in this meeting, and great to see some space to AI auditing and bias detection. So as Sylvia was saying, Gemma Galdon-Clavel, I'm the CEO at Ethicas AI. I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to be super quick. At Ethicas AI, we do two things mainly. We audit AI systems for organizations that require their systems to be audited, also when they're using AI in hiring or in any other kind of domain. But we also collaborate with civil society that feels that they have been impacted by AI systems, any kind of AI system, from LLMs to ADMs to biometric identification systems, like any kind of intensive data system. And we team up with communities impacted by AI, and we help them reverse engineer those systems. That is our main role in DIVERSIFAIR that was presented earlier, where we are conducting a series of those audits together with civil society in Europe to help them understand how these systems impact on their rights and their communities, and also build their awareness and knowledge on how these systems work. For the work that we do with organizations that want their systems audited, we also build software. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is make auditing more accessible and use software to lower the cost of an audit and make it more available to more people. And also in this process, contribute to a debate as to what bias detection means, because there's a lot of tools out there that claim to do bias detection that are actually very problematic. And I'll go into why that is. So the first thing to say, I think, is like an audit is an inspection mechanism. An audit is an exercise that allows us to go into an AI system at any phase of development and see what is happening, see how the system is working, how the data is being processed. And when we are focusing on bias, so when we are doing a bias audit, what we do is we are trying to see how a system performs with different categories of people. And that leads me to what I think is one of the misconceptions that we often have when we discuss bias in AI systems. There's a tendency to blame society for AI bias, to say that society is biased, and that's why the training data is biased, and that's why AI is biased. That is only partially true. Yes, society is biased, and yes, AI systems inherit really biased data sets, and that bias is then reproduced by those systems. But it's not only reproduced, it's not only captured and reproduced, it is also amplified. And I think we need to discuss this a lot more. AI has a serious problem with bias. AI really struggles with difference. Any kind of attribute that is a minority in an AI dataset will be punished by the algorithm. So even if we had a fair society that created fair data sets to then train those systems, the AI dynamic would be to penalize these outliers, these minorities in the data set. Therefore, putting all the emphasis on the training process is very problematic. And so what we do when we audit systems is, yes, we look at what's happening in training and we see what kind of structural discrimination dynamics are being incorporated by a system, but we also look at what is the system doing to correct that or to make it worse. And what we often find is that the AI system makes things worse. So yes, you are inheriting bias from society, but then you make that bias even worse because these systems are trained to identify patterns in historical data and reproduce majority patterns. And the reproduction of majority patterns in those systems is always at the expense of minority patterns. And so if you start with a lot of men and not a lot of women in a data set, the system will over time privilege men in ways that basically exclude women from the process. And so when we audit, we put an emphasis on auditing the whole life cycle. So it is about the training, it's also about the model, but then it's also about the impact. What we find oftentimes with AI systems, especially in Europe, where the law requires that there's always a human in the loop, is that the AI recommendation may not be a good proxy for the actual fairness of the system. And so you're only auditing a hiring platform, for instance, based on what the outputs are. I mean, that's great. And you can see if the model is fair or not, but who got the job in the end? Who got the medical treatment in the end? Who got the benefit in the end? If you do not track that, you cannot assess actual harm. You can have a proxy for harm, which is derived from model metrics, but in our experience, there's a big gap between model metrics and model fairness and actual fairness in impact. And so again, when we audit AI systems, we audit the training data, we audit the model data, and we audit the impact data. And what we do is basically monitor outlier performance throughout the AI lifecycle to ensure that in the end, once a decision was made, that decision was fair and people were not left out due to attributes that are linked to gender, ethnicity, age, geographic location, your first name, or any other thing that should not have been taken into account when making the decision. And once you do that, actually intersectional bias is really easy because you have all the data, and we can also see whether there's dynamics of intersectional discrimination in those systems. So what we put forward is an approach to bias detection and measurement that moves away from the focus on training or model fairness, and that opens the scope to make sure that we are assessing the actual impacts of those systems, that we monitor this performance of outliers, that we understand that in AI systems, bias is not a bug, bias is a feature. AI systems are designed, their logic is to discriminate. And so unless we have specific mechanisms and audit mechanisms that allow us to identify when this bias is happening, but unless we have specific mechanisms to unbias, to protect these outliers, to protect these minorities, what we'll have is systems that always tend to reproduce majority patterns at the expense of the minority. And so that's what we're trying to put on the table. We are launching today software to audit hiring systems based on the New York City 144 law, which is the first law in the world that asks companies using AI in hiring to audit their systems. It's a methodology that we don't like. It's a methodology that only measures one model metric, and that is very, very limited. But it's a first step towards understanding what an audit is and how audits can contribute to developers and implementers of AI systems having a better understanding of how these systems are performing for those minority groups and what the impact of those systems are. So again, I don't have much time. I want to leave you with just three key messages. One, audit. We need inspection mechanisms for these systems. General commitments are not enough. We need to be able to assess how these systems are performing. The second thing is bias is not just a training or model issue. Bias needs to be overseen throughout the life cycle of the system. And third, focus on impact. What we care about is who got the job in the end, who got the medical treatment in the end, what are the actual impacts of those systems. Any kind of measurement that we do beforehand is going to be limited unless we put that in relationship with what happened in the end. So end-to-end socio-technical audits of AI systems are really, really important. And the good news is that we can do that at a very, very reasonable cost. These are not really costly exercises. These are things that can be done, that developers can often implement. We need more data on how these systems are impacting on society to make sure that we protect those minority groups in any data set. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gemma. And actually, we still have 4 minutes. So there are a couple of questions in the chat that I think might be very interesting for you to address. There is one question from Shaz. I hope I'm saying right. Today it's very long, so I'll try to just summarize. And also, I haven't managed to read it all. But basically, this person is pointing out how we have talked a lot about the regulation and this very academic sort of approach to AI bias and discrimination. But this is a very concrete problem where there are a lot of power dynamics. So this person was wondering how can the people that are discriminated, so the ones that are really at the receiving end in a way of the issues of AI, what can they do to protect themselves and to challenge this discrimination?
Request an audit. That's the only way that we can have the data that then can be used to launch a campaign, or even to go to court. If you feel that you've been discriminated, your only solution in most of the world is to take organizations to court. But to take organizations to court, you need data. And so requesting that those audits are done, that the data is made public, is really, really important. I mean, the good news on this point on the regulation is that, as I said, bias is a feature. Bias is not a bug, and bias leads to worse outcomes. And so it is an accuracy problem. Like, your system will perform worse if you don't address the bias issue. You will have more false positives and false negatives if you do not mitigate for bias. And so there's a performance discussion to be had. And what we are finding is that oftentimes the organizations that come to us wanting an audit are aware that unless they understand that bias is harming the quality of their decisions, they will not be able to make good decisions. And so they audit because they want to address performance issues. So I think it's not just a compliance issue. If you're a bank and you're not giving mortgages to women because they're underrepresented in training data, and because you haven't made any efforts in unbiasing your model, not offering mortgages to women is a bad business decision. And so I think there's more and more organizations that are realizing that they cannot afford to have their decisions ruled by bias, because that leads to worse performance and towards outcomes. I also wanted to know that there's someone in the chat that just posted that they're working in Finder, Fairness and Intersectional Non-Discrimination in Human Recommendations. That's another EU project that we're also part of, where we are auditing hiring systems. So very happy to see more people from that here, and also very happy to see that the Commission is really investing in the issue of bias in AI.
Yes. There is a second part to the question that has been brought to my attention that maybe also connects to your work with the Finder, which is how are you working on partnering with the marginal communities in civil society to continue and monitor and challenge discrimination in AI?
So basically, these communities come to us. We're quite well known by now in Europe and in the US. But we're also auditing in Latin America and Africa. Communities come to us when they're concerned about the impact of an AI system. So our first community-led audit was with women victims of domestic violence, because their risk was being assigned by an algorithm. We are now working with Roma communities in Europe to assess price discrimination in ride-hailing apps. We are working with patients groups to look at how LLMs perform with minority diseases. So basically, we're an on-demand organization. Communities come to us when they're concerned that an AI system is impacting on their members in ways that are not explainable or harmful, and we work with them to reverse engineer those systems, and in the process help them understand how these systems work. Sometimes our work has led to court cases, sometimes to these groups doing more policy intervention and trying to change regulation and protections. We're working quite a lot with disability communities. We did a report on Down syndrome and facial recognition, and we are currently working with blind people with emotion recognition. So kind of putting on the table how these systems fail specific communities in ways that are not acceptable.
Yes, thank you, Gemma. And connected also to a specific community, there is a question from Osge, which I think will be the last one that we take, and then we will have to move on due to the time. But Osge is asking if you have any research or audit in diverse cultures, especially in the Middle East.
We haven't done any work in the Middle East, but we have a guide. It's called Guide to Adversarial Auditing, where we explain the different methodologies that can be used. We're also working on putting more materials out there to make communities more autonomous, so that they can do this work without us. I mean, the goal is that they don't need us to reverse engineer those systems, and they can create their own data and their own audits. But there's quite a lot of material out there. They can go to our website, ethicasfoundation.org, and find the guide. The guide is currently being updated, so we'll have a guide to community-led audits published early next year. But we have like almost 10 audits that we have done in the last 5-6 years that are already published that people can use, and also they can come to us if they're interested in doing something. We'd be more than happy to work in the Middle East and help any organization out there that feels that they need to know more about how these AI systems are impacted on their communities, and work with them, even maybe in the context of the DIVERSIFAIR project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gemma. Thank you so much again for your presentation and for answering our questions. Unfortunately, we have to move to our next speaker due to the time. I just wanted to mention to Monique, maybe Gemma, you can answer to her question in the chat, because it's also about facial recognition and border control, if you have something to add to her. So your question is not totally forgotten, Monique. We are trying to just be mindful of the time. We now move on to Maria San Giuliano, already partially introduced before, but Maria San Giuliano from Smart Venice. She's the research director and CEO of Smart Venice. Is a senior gender researcher and project manager with an MA in philosophy and social sciences and a PhD in cognitive and learning studies. And at Smart Venice, which is a partner in the BIAS project consortium, she has led the development of co-creation methodologies for bias mitigation in algorithms and designed the project's capacity building programs. So, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Silvia. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you and see the slides.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It was really interesting to listen to the discussions and all the inputs so far for such a challenging and complex issue that we have in navigating a fair use of artificial intelligence, in particular in recruitment. That is the focus of the BIAS capacity building program. That is what I've been asked to present today, which is quite linked to one of the last questions that we had from the panel in terms of what can we do to maximize societal impact, apart from the algorithmic research and the social sciences research and addressing the legal aspects. Indeed, the training program that we have designed was thought of for maximizing this impact and increasing chances for raising the awareness on these topics. So basically in BIAS, you already heard the presentation from Roger Sora earlier on. There's a lot of technical and ethnographic research undergoing. And we have built on that cutting-edge scientific research on both sides and interdisciplinary, together with co-creation processes that we have set up to distill the knowledge that has been elicited and that it actually still under generation, so to speak, to design a capacity building program for all of the stakeholders that are part of the pipeline in AI-assisted recruiting and hiring. So yeah, we are addressing 3 different types of beneficiaries, and have a specific curricula designed for each one of them with some common parts, but there are also very well-tailored elements. So we target AI specialists on one hand, workers' representatives and NGOs, and HR specialists. So clearly we include a variety of profiles. We consider AI specialists, researchers, data engineers, data analysts, but also business analysts, so including both academic and more market-oriented profiles, and AI machine learning engineers and system architects. The group of workers representatives and minorities representatives is also extremely important, as it has already been pointed out. Here we have trade unions as main stakeholders. We have designed this course in particular with the collaboration of the European Trade Union Institute. That is part of our advisory board group, and civil societies from different minority groups, including feminist organizations, but also entities and NGOs representing racialized groups and LGBTQI communities, and so on and so forth. And then the HR specialists, who are actually those who benefit from the decision, from the assistance of AI in the decisions they have to take, but they can also be more at risk of not seeing the bias that is there, or juggling between their own perceptions and decisions and as humans and the indications they receive from the algorithms. These courses, the BIAS courses that are about to start soon, can be of interest to you if you are really triggered by the idea of having the chance to understand and mitigate gender and diversity biases with an intersectional perspective that is really cross-cutting throughout the courses. But also, if you have an interest into developing a critical thinking approach to human-machine interaction with a socio-technical perspective on AI applied to workplace domains, and also navigating the ethical considerations of AI, fairness, and the regulatory implications that are there. Cross-cutting to all the stakeholder groups, the courses that we have designed actually tackle an exploration of the complex role of artificial intelligence in HR management. We want to focus, and we focus in the course on potentials, but also challenges when it comes to ethics and fairness. We do this in a dynamic setting with a lot of participatory and inclusive methodologies. And we aim at generating a peer-to-peer open space for learning, dialogue, collaboration. And this is clearly also at no cost to participants, because we are part of Horizon Europe project. Really, reflexivity is a key word in terms of what we want to achieve with our courses. The curricula and the entire set of materials and everything that we have designed is the result of a quite long and complex process. We started with an initial benchmarking of the existing courses to try and position what we would do. We used all the co-creation workshops that we organized also as a way to gather input on the learning design, even though co-creation in BIAS had a broader frame and a broader scope. We consulted training experts as well as our advisory board members. And we also exchanged with sister projects, particularly starting with attending ourselves the e-learning course offered by Find HR as an example, but also interacting in the different cluster meetings with the sister projects of BIAS was an inspiration to the design of the curriculum. More in concrete, what these courses will be about. The courses will be relatively short. They will last 6 hours each over 1 or 2 sessions. They will be on-site, online, or hybrid, depending on the host partner of the courses. And as mentioned, they will be entirely free upon registration. We have limited numbers of seats available. All the courses will be delivered in English. That's also important to mention. A bit of a short dive into the training methodologies, because when attending the courses, you will of course hear and attend several research-informed presentations. But this is definitely not an academic type of offer. So we have designed a lot of case studies, analysis, and based on real-world examples that highlight all the challenges faced by women and minority groups in AI applications for recruitment and HR management, so a bit broader. We will have a series of self-reflection exercises aimed at examining personal biases and privileges, reflecting on positionalities, and also practice sessions aimed at reinforcing learning and becoming acquainted with interacting with AI-based tools through a series of applications that we have created through coding for AI specialists and even board games. A quick view, just to be a bit more visual, on the so-called hiring black box that we have built in the consortium as an application that is linked to ChatGPT that simulates a ranking process. We have generated synthetic data, CVs and application letters for a fictional recruitment process. And the machine is asked to rank the candidates based on a series of features that need to be taken into account in the recruitment, in the specific recruitment simulated case. And after selecting the 5 top evaluation features, a ranking is generated, and there is the opportunities to reflect on how human decision-making works in comparison with the machine-assisted decision-making, and particularly in terms of intersectional biases. That's the focus. And this exercise is tailored to HR officers and specialists. While with AI specialists, we will work with value-sensitive design frameworks. So we'll try to reflect on the fact, as also Gemma was mentioning, that bias is not a bug, is a feature. And the computer scientists behind and the engineers behind the systems, they are also influenced by a set of values. The same comes for all the stakeholders designing and using the systems, and an awareness of these values needs to be brought into the picture with an orientation to inclusiveness and fairness, clearly. With AI specialists, we will have coding sessions, as I was mentioning, and basic ones and speed coding sessions, because as you heard, the courses will be short, but it will be a way to make the learning experience more hands-on again. With trade unions and civil society organizations, instead, we will make use of a hard copy board game, a very nice one developed by the European Trade Union Institute, where participants will have the chance to reflect on how, with a bit of role-playing and a gamification element here, they will reflect on the challenges posed by technologies in the workplace and how, with their organizations, they can contribute raising the awareness of workers, or take legal action, or even work towards an integration of these topics into collective agreements potentially.
Okay, Maria.
Yeah,
we are
that's the
out
last
of time.
one.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
That's really a visual map of where the courses will take place. We have just a few days for now. The first round will take place between February and April, and the second round between October and December. Take notes of the dates, but you will receive the slides, and all the informations will appear, and the registration forms will appear on our website. For the online sessions, we will accept registrants even outside the countries where the courses will be organized. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Maria. And I see that they're already asking in the chat about the link to register. So maybe you can answer there. I don't know if it's already available, but anyway, keep a look on the BIAS website, and we will, of course, post all of these awareness raising events there. So thank you again, Maria. Before we move on to our last speaker, I would like to take you a few minutes to answer to a couple of surveys, actually. So now there should be soon a survey appearing in the Zoom directly. Perfect, which is a feedback survey about this event. And in the chat, there will also be a second survey from the DIVERSIFAIR project. That it's a very quick survey again. We just ask you to take a couple of minutes to give your answers to these, as they are quite important for us to know both what you thought about the event and your opinions about the topics. Perfect. I see that Crowdhelix now posted the second survey in the chat. And it says it won't take more than 3 minutes. And while you take these quick surveys, I would like to introduce our last speaker then. Now we will hear from Kais Jürgens from Crowdhelix. Kais is responsible for growing the academic and industrial membership base of Crowdhelix International Network and Collaboration Platform. So now he will introduce us to the Trustworthy AI community that drives impact acceleration and future collaborations from BIAS research results, which I hope will be very interesting to our very active audience today, so they can use it to keep in touch. Kais?
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Can you hear me okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can hear you and see your
brilliant.
screen.
Brilliant, thank you. So I've got about 10 minutes to get this across to you. Essentially, I'm here to present to you the Trustworthy AI Helix community built within the Crowdhelix platform. So this is the community that was created for the BIAS project to map stakeholders into a specific place to keep up with what the project is doing, to facilitate future collaborative partnerships in the Trustworthy AI area of interest, and to disseminate and communicate the results of the project and linked sister or cluster projects as they are coming out. Many of you who are members of Crowdhelix will already have access to this platform. If you do not have access, please drop me an email and get in touch. I will put my email in the chat in a moment. But I'm just going to give you a quick demo on how to access this and what to do, and how you can engage directly with this, the Trustworthy AI community. First, if you haven't, go to crowdhelix.com, and under organization, you can register. So if your organization is in the drop-down menu, you will find it there. And we send you a quick confirmation link and you are good to go. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what to do when you first access in order to tailor the platform to work for you. Essentially, this is our own machine learning dashboard. And this is where we match two things directly to you based on the expertise that you have. First, it matches to you opportunities to collaborate from other users on our platform who are posting in, for example, the Trustworthy AI Helix. and they are seeking expertise that you have. This is directly matched to you through our dashboard. The second thing that we match directly to you are calls coming out of the European Funding and Tenders portal. So if you've ever spent time going through work programs trying to figure out what you are eligible for, hopefully this will cut down that time. This can all be tailored here on settings when you make up a profile. You can add information about yourself, but most importantly, add expertise keywords related to you and the expertise that you have to offer, some kind of collaborative partnership, and the machine learning will do its work. You should also subscribe to the Trustworthy AI Helix and related helixes to receive notifications about what's happening and opportunities to collaborate. This is done under notifications, and you will find the Trustworthy AI Helix. Simply push the button and you are now subscribed. Okay, so let's move on. In terms of Crowdhelix, what we do essentially is facilitate collaboration and disseminate project results across more than 50 thematic communities, 50 areas of interest that we call helixes. So each of these topic areas you see here, think of it as a community or a village populated by researchers and research managers from academia, industry, research centers, big businesses that are looking to connect and collaborate. To filter for the Trustworthy AI Helix, we select it from below. And click filter. And now we can see the most recent opportunities that have been posted in that community, including one from just 20 minutes ago from the University of Bologna. To have an overview of all of the communities, go to Network and Helixes, and we can scroll down and find our Trustworthy AI Helix here. Now, this is the community that we're promoting as part of this project. As you can see, it's linked with multiple other communities like citizen science, like health, like security, like virtual reality. You can post into up to multiple communities at a time, into up to 3 at a time. You can engage with these communities in 3 different ways as well. The opportunities to collaborate, that's what an opportunity means, typically a pre-award collaborative partnership in the making. And you can see that they've been added here. So let's take a look at a recent one posted by the University of Twente in the Netherlands. This individual has posted in the health, digital, and trustworthy AI Helix communities. They are seeking expertise in AI for healthcare, human resource management, legal expertise, AI in medicine. They go into detail about who they are, what they'd like to achieve with this consortium, what type of grant they are targeting, and then you could respond by sending a private message to them, sharing the opportunity with a colleague, or leaving a comment below, like all of these individuals have done. This is open collaboration happening in real time, and this is what we are trying to facilitate in the Trustworthy AI space. The second way we can engage with this community are the results. These are results coming out of projects like BIAS or linked projects with an aspect of AI or Trustworthy AI. We want to showcase these project key exploitable results to a large network of stakeholders for dissemination, communications, and impact purposes, for commercialization, and for making sure the results end up having an impact on society. Any and all of you who have access to Crowdhelix can post pre-award partnership calls, or you can post about results of projects. Again, please drop me a message if you'd like to learn more. The third way you can engage are events, and we are at this event right now. Crowdhelix hosts more than 40 events per year. Many of them are online training sessions. Some of them are impact and dissemination focused events. Some of them are in-person matchmaking and brokerage events. We have an entire events schedule for next year, soon to be released, with at least 6 clustering events for the first half of 2025. If you click View Helix, well, we have some background and some scope, essentially a landing page for the community to not just learn about the Trustworthy AI Helix and why it exists, but also to learn about the BIAS project. So far, we have mapped over 440 researchers from 46 countries into the Trustworthy AI Helix. This is the reach of the people that you can essentially reach out to when you're posting, seeking partners, when you're showcasing results of projects you're engaged in. And this community is growing ever more. You can join this community by clicking the join button here. Crowdhelix is a membership-based organization, but there's multiple ways that you can get involved to view the results and the posts coming out of the community. So please drop me a message. Let's have a discussion. Let's get you set up. Let's get you engaging in the Trustworthy AI Helix and the other linked communities. I know that was really, really quick. Hopefully that made sense in some way. I look forward to discussing with you if you'd like to learn more. So thanks for your time and attention. Handing back to Sylvia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. And this is the end of our event now. This is a great way, I think, to end, because joining the Trustworthy AI Helix will be a wonderful way to keep in touch with all of the participants. We learned a lot. I know that, of course, this is a very wide topic, so we only scratched the surface, I think. But at least we know that there are a lot of good initiatives and good projects out there that you can engage with, like the BIAS project, DIVERSIFAIR, and also we heard from Find HR in the chat. So, of course, we are all trying to make artificial intelligence fairer and also more inclusive, especially considering intersectionality. As Maria mentioned, of course, as BIAS project, we have the awareness raising events that are going to happen all throughout 2025. So keep an eye on the BIAS communications. I don't know if DIVERSIFAIR has events coming up, but of course, keep an eye also on the DIVERSIFAIR website and social media. If you haven't done so already, also please answer the survey feedback in the chat. Yes, exactly, that Andrea is sharing again. It only takes a couple of minutes and it's about this event. So this is it. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I have to say that it was wonderful to see the chat blow up. And I want to thank all of our speakers again, and everyone that participated also in the organization of this event. I don't know if DIVERSIFAIR would like to add something, because I don't know from their side if there is anything specific. Okay, they're posting their website in the chat. I think we can also post the BIAS website. Let me give.
Yeah, sorry, Sylvia, this is Louise from DIVERSIFAIR. I know we just wanted to thank everyone and thank BIAS and Crowdhelix for the organization. And yeah, just visit our websites and follow us on LinkedIn and share updates on upcoming events and deliverables too.
Perfect. Thank you, Louise. Wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining us.